Pragmatics. That is the new idea we're going to discuss today in lecture number 19 of the course Linguistics 2, English 504. Now, before we discuss what is pragmatics, what does this word mean, let's talk a little about what we did in the last lecture. Review of lecture 18. And we talked in detail about the idea of structuralism. Structuralism ignores explanatory adequacy, meaning linguistic universals, native speakers' intuition, and his competence of generating infinite number of sentences from a finite set of items. Now, this was basically one of the criticisms launched against structuralism, and in the last lecture, you remember, we talked in detail about some of the weaknesses of the idea of structuralism, some of the weak points, some of the areas where the structuralism doesn't meet the requirement, doesn't come up to the standards of the of people who were dealing with the language study in that time. So structuralism had its strong point that we discussed in the previous lecture, the lecture before the last lecture, and then we talked about the weaknesses or the deficiencies that were found in the idea of structuralism, and then we also talked about a new idea given by the Prague school, that was functionalism. Now, language, as we see about the weaknesses of structuralism, we see that some of the more criticisms that were launched were language is not merely an inventory or catalog of items as structuralists imagine. Now, what the structuralists said, they said that language is just like an inventory. It's a catalog of language items, and they didn't bring the element of meaning into it. They didn't bring the element of deep meaning into it or the deep structures into it. Structuralists failed to capture all the ambiguities and relations. So any ambiguities that came during utterances, or any ambiguities that are there in the minds of the listeners, and due to those ambiguities they might utter sentences, or they might not give the desired feedback, that were not taken into consideration by the structuralists, and they never discussed the relationships between the mutual relationships, the interrelatedness between the structures or between the words when they were put together. They just looked at the words in the mechanical shape as they were present. It does not include the idea of creativity. One of the main features of human beings, the element of creativity, the ability to create language, the ability to create the infinite forms, the infinite structures out of the finite vocabulary or the finite rules. So that is one of the capabilities, or one of the powers, one of the important features of human beings, and the structuralists ignore that. Now, a grammar should also account for deep structures. That was the criticism launched, and that was an important point, in fact, that the structuralists, they never looked at the deep structures. They just look at the surface structures, they looked at the surface meanings, and they analyzed the sentence as it exists at that time. They never looked at the past of a sentence. They didn't bring the diachronic approach into it. They just looked at the synchronic or syntagmatic structures, horizontal analysis of sentences. They never looked at the historical element. They never looked at the factors that how the sentence came into that time after passing through different stages of the history. So they never looked at the deep structures, how the sentence came, what was the origin of a sentence, what was the deep meaning behind that, what was the hidden meaning or the underlying meaning in the mind of the speaker that was not accounted for. It should give such rules that give phonetic transcriptions of surface rules and semantic interpretations of the deep structures. Now, an advice for the structuralists that structural grammar should give the phonetic transcriptions of the surface rules. What are the rules? The rules, apparent rules. It should talk about the phonetic transcriptions or the phonetic relationship between the words on the surface level. And then, after that, going at the deeper level, it should talk about the meanings. It should talk about the semantic interpretations of deep structures. So both surface and the deep structures, they should be accounted for structuralists, they also only looked at the surface structures, which was wrong. The Prague school rejected Saussurian distinction of synchronic and diachronic linguistics and homogeneity of language system. Then we talked about the Prague school, we talked about the functionalism, that language is analyzed taking into consideration how that language is being used in society, what role or what function that role that language has in a certain society. So it was the followers of this functionalism were basically, they belonged to Prague school, and they rejected the Saussurian distinction of synchronic and diachronic linguistics and homogeneity of language system. You remember that it was Ferdinand de Saussure said that language is same. All the languages are same because they are basically coming out of the deep structures, and they are basically coming out of the universal grammar that is already present in the minds of speakers. So they are same in a way that they play the same function, they play the same role, because they refer to the physical world. All the languages, they are used to refer basically to the physical world and the objects around people, so they are the same. And this idea was basically rejected by the Prague school. Functionalism in linguistics emphasizes the instrumental character of language. Functionalism, the role of functionalism was basically that it talked about the instrumental character of language. What instrument? We had examples that in the everyday life you have different instruments for every procedure. So what instrumental role was language playing basically? Language was taken as a machine. Language was taken as an instrument. So what function the language was playing in the society? That was the idea of the functionalism. Furthermore, it says that the structure of language systems is partly, though not wholly, determined by functions. And it said that this idea of language was basically not wholly, but at least partly it belonged to the functions, and it belonged to the role of the language, what role language was playing in the society. Now, today we have a new idea, pragmatics, another branch, another theory given by another group of people. And you see the name pragmatics, somewhat related with mind, somewhat again related with the meaning. Pragmatics is a study of how to do things with words, how to make combinations of words, how to link the words in different combinations. The name of a well-known book by philosopher J.L. Austin. Now, this is basically also the name of one of the famous books, How to Do Things with the Words, and that came to be known as the definition of pragmatics. We have put it as a definition of pragmatics because that was such a great work that in fact pragmatics got the whole idea, or pragmatics got a definition, got words from the name of that book. Or perhaps how people do things with words. To be more descriptive about it, to be plain about it, more descriptive about it, we can say how people do things with words. What is pragmatics? Pragmatics deals with how people make things, how people do things with words, how people make combinations, how people create sentences with words. Now, 4 aspects of pragmatics we'll be dealing with in this class, in this lecture: speech acts, rhetorical structure, conversational implication, and the management of reference in discourse. That is the discourse, that is the course today. We'll be talking about speech acts, rhetorical structures, conversational implication, and the management of reference. Now, let's look at the first one, speech acts. What do you understand with this, by this? Speech acts, the actions related with speech. People use language to accomplish certain kinds of acts, the actions. They have some meaning in their mind. They have some desire in their mind. They have a function, they have a desire, they have a function in their mind, and they use language for that. Broadly known as speech acts. What are these acts? The certain kinds of acts performed by people are called speech acts. They are distinct from physical acts, like drinking a glass of water, or mental acts like thinking about drinking a glass of water. Now, what is the physical act? These two are the physical acts, like somebody drinking a glass of water, or maybe thinking about a glass of water. They are distinct. The speech acts are distinct from these. Now, what are they? Let's proceed. Speech acts include asking for a glass of water, promising to drink a glass of water, threatening to drink a glass of water, ordering someone to drink a glass of water, and so on. Now look at the keywords, the words in italics here. Asking, right? Asking for a glass of water. Here you have asking for a glass of water. You have promising to drink a glass of water. You have threatening to drink a glass of water. You have asking, threatening. You have ordering, right? All these you have promising. So these words you can see: asking, promising, the functions, the acts. Speech acts include asking, promising, threatening, ordering. Most of these ought really to be called communicative acts, since speech and even language are not strictly required. So a very beautiful term, communicative acts. The actions performed through communication. The actions that one performs using communication, using words. Now, since, look at the second part of the sentence here, speech and even language are not strictly required. They are not strictly required here. Most of these, that's why we call them communicative acts. You are basically doing actions, you're performing the actions, the mental actions, using words. Okay, now, what do we have next? So someone can ask for a glass of water by pointing to the pitcher and miming the act of drinking. It's common to divide speech acts into two categories, direct and indirect. Now here, when we talk about speech acts, we have two different kinds of speech acts. One is the direct speech act and the other is the indirect speech act. Now look at the direct speech acts. There are three basic types of direct speech acts. They correspond to three special syntactic types. They seem to occur in most of the world languages. So there are three special syntactic types that come under the heading of direct speech acts. Now, we have a chart showing different types of different types of speech acts, the sentence type, the function, the examples. Now look, this is your first speech act, assertion, right? Now what is the sentence type we'll use to assert? When somebody wants to assert something, somebody wants to emphasize on something, somebody wants to force something, here we call it assertion speech act, and it's declarative. Now sentence type, declarative. And what is the function the sentence is playing? It conveys information. It's true or false. It could be true, it could be false, but it conveys assertion, it conveys an assertive information, an information through which you assert, through which you force, through which you emphasize. Now look at an example here. Jenny got an A on the test. The girls took photos. Ali took the food. Now this is a statement, a simple assertive statement, an A on the test. Now this could be true or false. It's not necessary that Jenny really got A. She may not have got A, but this is an assertive statement. You're just uttering a statement to assert. The girls took photos. It's just information. You are conveying information. It's true or false. Ali took the food. May not have taken food, but he's just conveying information, and information is passed, and it's an assertive information. The next function, the next speech act is a question, and the question sentence type would be interrogative. You'll be using an interrogative sentence to assert the speech act of, to give the speech act of question. You'll be asking question. And what is the function? Elicits information. You want to take some information. You want to extract some information. And did Jenny get an A on the test? Did the girls take photos? Did Ali take food? Now you all are very familiar with these very simple interrogative sentences. Did Jenny get an A on the test? A yes-no question commonly referred to. What are you doing? You're just asking a question, yes or no. Did the girls take photos? Did Ali take food? No, these are all, what are they? They are examples of the sentences which are used to indicate the speech act of question, asking questions. Next you see orders and requests. Orders and requests. Number 3, imperative. Sentence type, imperative. Giving orders. The sentences used to give orders. It causes others to behave in certain ways. When you are giving orders, you expect others to do something. You expect a certain behavior from others. You expect a certain response from others. When you give orders, you give instructions. You also request. Whenever you request, you expect somebody to listen to you and, of course, help you. For example, you have orders like close the window, or you have requests like, can you help me? Can I use your car? Can you lend me your car? Can I borrow your car? Now, all these are basically the request sentences or the order sentences. So the sentence type is basically imperative. Cause others to behave in certain ways. Now look at the example. Get an A on the test. Take some photos. Take the food. All these imperative sentences. You can also request using imperative sentence here, like get an A on the test, take some photos is a request. Take some photos is a request. Take the food is, again, you can call it a request. Get an A on the test could be an order, it can't be a request, because normally the context of the sentence shows us that maybe the father or the mother is telling the son or daughter to get an A on the test, or the teacher is giving orders to the students, or telling them forcibly to get A on the test. So all these are examples of orders and requests. The sentence type imperative, and the function causes others to behave in certain ways. You make people behave in a certain way when you give order or when you give request for anything. Now, moving on, we just saw the examples in the last chart. We saw the examples of speech acts. We saw the examples of different speech acts that could be performed using language. Although assertions, questions, and orders are fairly universal, and most of the world's languages have separate syntactic structures or syntactic constructions that distinguish them, other speech acts do not have a syntactic construction that is specific to them. So most of the languages in the world, they separate the syntactic constructions. They have different constructions for different speech acts. They have different constructions for different functions for requests, for orders, for questions, for assertions. Different languages have different structures. But look at the last part. Other speech acts do not have a syntactic construction that is specific to them. Most of the speech acts, they do have different words or different constructions, but some of them, they have the same. Some of the languages in the world, they don't put a focus, they have the same sentences, they have the same constructions. Consider the English sentence, if you cross that line, I'll shoot you. Now, most English speakers would have no trouble identifying such an utterance as a threat. A very evident fact that if you see this sentence, most of the English speakers would take it as a threat. It's a threat. If you cross that line, I'll shoot you. If you don't give me the money, I'll kill you. However, English has no special sentence form for threats. The if construction used in A is not specific to the speech act of threatening. Now, if we don't have separate words, we don't have no special sentence form for threats, we are just using the conditional if. Whereas if you say that if is the only way we can if is used just for threats, no, that is not the case. If can have different functions as well. Such a construction might also express a promise, as in, if you get all A's, I'll buy you a car. If you help me, I'll be thankful. If you if you cross that line, I'll shoot you. Now look at these two different kinds of sentences using the same conditional word if. If you get an A, I promise I'll get you a car. Use if. You're using if for a promise. If you help me, I'll be thankful. A different function. And if you cross the line, I'll shoot you. A threat. So you are using only the word if to separate. You don't have a separate word, a distinctive word to show threats, to separate threats from promises. Here you just can see that it's only the word if, right? Now here, if you see this is the word if, right? I'm highlighting it. If is the word being used for different constructions, for different speech acts. Or simply a cause and effect relationship in physical events. If you heat water to 212 degrees Fahrenheit, it will boil. Here the function is different again. This is a cause-effect relationship. The cause, if you heat water to 212 degrees Fahrenheit, it will boil. If you work hard, you will pass. A very common example which we've heard so many times in our careers and so many times in our life. If you work hard, you will pass. So you are here using if to show the cause-effect relationship. If this happens, this will happen. If this happens, this will happen. If you, no, I'm repeating the three types here. If you help me, I'll be thankful. If you cross that line, I'll kill you. If you work hard, you will pass. If you help me, I'll be thankful. Now, so you see, you have different words, different functions, but the word is the same. If you have different kinds of speech acts being performed, the threat, the request, the result, all being given using just one word, conditional word, if. Okay. A consideration of the syntactic means available for expressing the various speech acts leads us to see that even for the three basic speech acts laid out in the table above, speakers may choose means of expression other than the basic syntactic types associated with speech act in question. Now, here we see that the acts which we talked about in the table, the question, assertion, all those three, even for those three acts, the imperative. Now, even for those three speech acts, a speaker might use different combination, might use basic acts, a speaker may choose means of expression other than the basic syntactic type. So a speaker might use them differently, might use them other expressions for the same things, may choose means of expression other than the basic syntactic type. So leaving aside the basic syntactic type, speaker might choose some other expressions as well, may choose different means of expressions for the same functions. To some extent, this just reflects the existence of a diversity of means of expression, but a more pervasive reason is that speakers may use indirect rather than direct speech acts. Now here we come across another word, indirect speech acts. Remember, we said that there are direct speech acts, indirect speech acts. So we talked about the direct speech acts, but sometimes the speakers may use different words, different combinations, and they are called the indirect speech acts. For the same functions, they may have different expressions. Now, let's look at what are the indirect speech acts. Returning to the speech act of questioning, we can easily come up with a number of alternate ways to ask the same question by using sentence types other than interrogative. Now see, remember we used interrogative sentences in the table. We saw interrogative sentences in the table. We used interrogative sentences to ask a question. Did he get A? Did he eat food? Did he play cricket? All these are the usual ways, the usual interrogative sentences which we use to ask questions. But what happens if we have different cases? Let's look at again interrogative sentences. Did Jamie get an A on the test? A positive answer, yes, to that question would give the questioner the actual answer she wanted. Now, the answer, usual answer, yes, she did. Or no, she didn't. That is the usual answer. That is the regular answer. That is the regular syntactic structure that we get. But now consider D2 here. Do you know if Jenny got an A on the test? another way to ask. See, do you know if Jenny got an A on the test? This is still in the form of question, but it probably is not an inquiry about what you know. It's a different inquiry now. Most of the time the answer, yes I do, would be ostentatiously uncooperative. It would really sound a little blunt if somebody says, yes I do. This means, you don't need to tell me, yes I already know. Would be ostentatiously uncooperative. The normal answer we would expect in real life would be, yes she did, or no she only got a B, or something of that sort. So in the normal life, people won't be that rude, people won't be that blunt as to give an answer like, yes she did. Do you know she got a do you know she got an A? Yes I know. No, yes I know would not be the usual answer. It would be a little blunt answer. So by using indirect, do you know if Jenny got an A on the test? So the usual answer that we get in life is, yes she did, or no she didn't. So here you are not replying the exact question. The exact question, if you just link it mechanically, link the answer with the question mechanically, you get, yes I know. Do you know he's coming? Yes I know. Do you know he has come? Yes I know. Do you know he's entered the room? Yes I know. Yes I know would be rude. Yes he has. Yes he has entered. That would be the usual answer. That would be the correct answer. That would be in fact the appropriate answer according to the situation. So here, looking at the indirect speech acts, we see that asking question can be in a different shape as well. Do you know if Jenny got an A on the test? You can even say, did Jenny get an A on the test? The answer is, yes she did. Do you know if Jenny got an A on the test? Yes she did. Now look here, both the answers are the same, but the questioning way is different. So although the questioning way is different, but the answer is the same, because the direct answer to the question D2 would sound rude, would sound a bit blunt. Now here the reply is directed to the speech act meaning, not the literal meaning. See, we were saying that if he has directly answered the same question, the literal meaning, then it would sound rude, it would sound blunt. So what is the listener doing? What is the speaker, the respondent, what structure is the respondent using? He is using the same structure, but he is not replying to the literal question. He is not taking the question to the in literal sense. Here the reply is directed. It's directed to what? Speech act meaning, and not the literal meaning. Now the literal meaning of the sentence is that if I know that Jenny got an A, the literal answer would be, yes I know, but that would sound rude. So here I would direct my answer to, I would target the speech act meaning. I would direct my answer to speech act meaning, not the literal meaning. Literal meaning, if I do that, that would sound rude. A simple yes answer that responds to literal meaning, an uncooperative answer in actual social life. See, an uncooperative, a blunt, a rude answer in actual social life. People won't like you to answer them like, do you know he has entered the room? Yes, I know. So in social life, such answers are not given. Such answers are thought to be, are considered to be rude or blunt or uncooperative. Now, for example, yes I do would be heard as yes I do, but I'm not necessarily going to tell you. So I know it, but no, literally it would mean I know it, but I'm not going to tell you. So that would sound rude, that would sound out of place, that would sound inappropriate, that would sound uncooperative. All right. That other indirect ways of asking the same question using the declarative form are as under, like you can have other examples, you can have other sentences, some other indirect ways to ask question like, I would like to know if Jenny got an A on the test. I wonder whether Jenny got an A on the test. No, basically you are asking questions, but they are affirmative sentences. I would like to know if Jenny got an A on the test. I would like to know who's done the homework. I wonder who's done the homework. I wonder who's going to present today. I wonder who's come to our house today. No, I wonder who's coming to our house today. I wonder whose call it is. I wonder if you can come here. So you are asking questions, but you are using different sentences, you are using different structures. Now the Speech Act is the same. The Speech Act is of question. The act you want, the desire is to ask questions, but now you are asking different other forms, you are using different other forms other than the regular question form, the regular interrogative sentence. Now, conventional indirect requests may be expressed as questions as in E2 and E3, or as assertions, E4. In context, E5 and E6 may also be immediately understood as complaints, meant as an indirect request for action. Now, look at all these examples, what we've just mentioned. E2, could you close the window? E3, would you mind closing the window? E4, I would like you to close the window. Now see, E2, E3, or as assertion in E4, I would like you, this is assertion. Now these are different structures. Conventional indirect requests. No, these are indirect requests. May be expressed as questions. They could come in the form of questions. The requests may be put in the form of a question, like, could you close the window? Could you help me? Could you lend me your car? Could I use your car? No, basically you're putting questions in the form of an indirect way, an indirect request. Would you mind closing the window? No, you want somebody to close the window. You want somebody to respond in a certain way that he would get up and close the window. But you're not telling him directly, close the window. You're not telling him, could you close the window? But you're saying, would you mind closing the window? Now this is indirectly, would you mind closing the window? You are asking that person to close the window, but in an indirect way. I would like you to close the window. Assertive way to ask question, assertive way to tell somebody to do something. I would like you to close the window. So I basically want you to close the window, but I'm not telling you directly using the conventional indirect form, conventional question form or conventional interrogative sentence, can you close the window? Or I'm just using an assertive way, but basically the function is the same. The function is that I'm telling you, the speech act is the same, that I'm telling you to close the window. In the case of speech act, of requesting or ordering, speakers can be even more indirect. Now here, speakers have more choice in the case of requesting or ordering. As in the case of questions, conventional indirect requests may be questions about addressee's knowledge or ability. Here is a direct request. Let's look at a direct request. Please close the window. Now this is a direct request. Please close the window. You're using the word please to make it a request. But close the window, a form of imperative sentence, a form of assertive sentence, but you're using another word please with it just to change it to polite sentence, just to change the order to a polite order or polite request maybe. Speakers can even be as in the case of questions, conventional indirect requests may be questions about addressee's knowledge or ability. Now here, look at I've just read the lines again just for you to concentrate again, that it's a conventional indirect request, maybe questions about addressee's knowledge or ability. I wonder if you could do this. I wonder if you could help me. Or do you know if she's got an A? No, basically this is the direct question. If you look at the direct sentence, it's a sentence is about somebody's ability. You're asking about somebody's ability, that if somebody can get up and close the window, or you're asking about you're pointing at somebody's knowledge, if somebody knows that Jenny got an A. But here you have indirect ways as well. You are putting using the indirect ways. Basically the function is the same. Function is of requesting and ordering. Function is of questioning. So in case of speech act of requesting and ordering, you have can be even more indirect. You have so many indirect ways to request. You have so many indirect ways to order. So speakers can even be more indirect. As in case of questions about addressee's knowledge and ability. In case of questions, you have less choice. But in case of requesting and ordering, you have so many choices. To close the window, you can see so many more examples. The window is still open. Now here, what is this sentence? It means that you haven't closed the window. The window is still open. This means I want you to close the window, but I'm saying indirectly. The window is still open. An affirmative sentence. Affirmative sentence asking question or requesting somebody to get up and close the window. I must have asked you 100 times to keep that window closed. So basically, you want that person to close the window. The mother wants, for example, a child to get up and close the window. But she's saying it indirectly. Instead of saying, get up and close the window, can you close the window? Look at indirect way. I must have asked you 100 times to keep that window closed. So it means that I want you to close the window, but I'm saying it indirectly. Now, this is an indirect way to request somebody, to order somebody. Performatives, another area in pragmatics, another way to say things, to request or to order or to get your questions solved, or get your to question, or get to communicate your desires, to communicate what you have in your mind. Performatives. One subtype of direct speech acts exists in English and in many other languages and allows us to expand the kinds of direct speech acts we can make beyond the three basic types that have their own special syntax. So in addition to three basic types, we have more ways to convey the speech acts, to perform the speech acts. Subtype of direct speech acts. This is basically the subtype of direct speech acts. And in many other, this exists in English, not only in English, but in many other languages. And this basically gives us a margin to expand the kinds of direct speech acts. This gives us more choice. This gives us more options to use our direct speech, to perform our direct speech acts. Now, let's look at some of the examples here. These are direct speech acts that use performative verbs to accomplish their ends. Performative verbs can also be used with three basic speech acts types as exemplified in F and H, associated with making statements, requests, and commands, respectively. Now, performative verbs can be used to perform these speech acts. Performative verbs as assert. I assert that Jenny got an A on the test. Assert. You're using the direct word, performative verb, assert. I asked you who took the photos. Ask. The function, the speech act of asking, you are putting it directly. You are using that performative verb ask. I order you to close the window. Look at the three different words here. Assert. Look at the three different words here. Assert, ask, order. Okay? Now here, you are using the verbs directly. Assert, ask, order, to do the same thing. To basically assert what you want, to ask somebody to do something, or to order somebody to behave in a certain way. So this is another way, the use of performative verbs. To these can be added performative verbs that allow us to directly convey promises, threats, and warnings. Some more speech acts, like I advise you to keep up the payments on your car. I warn you not to step across this line. I promise you that I will pay the money back by the end of the month. I bet you $1 that it will rain on the parade. Now here you have different, like you have advice, you have warn, you have promise, you have you have bet here. So you have advice, warn, promise, bet. You are using directly the speech acts. You are for advice, the speech act of warning, the speech act of promising, the speech act of betting. So you are using the words directly. You are using the words directly to perform speech acts, to advise somebody, to warn somebody, to promise somebody, to bet. So you are using the words directly. These are called the performative verbs. The verbs which are performing the action, the verbs which are performing the role, which are performing the action, which are performing the direct speech act, which are helping you to convey what you want in a very direct way. Okay. In the last sentence, the utterance of the sentence actually accomplishes the act of betting, possibly along with the setting aside the money for the bet. You are basically performing the speech act of betting. The last sentence, I bet you $1 that it will rain. You're basically setting aside the money. You are basically doing the speech, performing the speech act. Which speech act? The speech act of betting. So, and you're using the word directly. I bet that it will rain. I bet you $100. So instead, putting aside the money, setting aside the money for the bet, you're also doing the speech act. You're also performing the speech act. Which speech act? The speech act of betting. Likewise, I warn you, I advise you. You're using the direct words, the direct performative verbs to perform these speech acts. Now, as such it belongs to the, no, here we have another word for such actions, such verbs, like ceremonial utterances. Like you have the ceremonial utterances like the bet, I warn you, I bet. This is ceremonial utterance, a word which may be uttered on any special occasion. No. I now pronounce you husband and wife. I name this ship Sojourner. I dub thee Sir Galahad. No, dub, name, pronounce. Again, ceremonial words. The words which are used ceremoniously. I now announce the results. I would now announce the results of the speech, the results of the exam. So ceremonial words which are used on special occasions, could be used on special ceremonies. Not all the uses of verbs that can be performative are actually performative in particular utterances. Sometimes the verbs, even the performative verbs, may not be performative, may not behave like playing the function of helping the speaker in giving the performing the speech act directly. For example, if we change the person or the tense in any of the last 7 sentences, they are no longer performative. We'll see the examples. He advises you to keep up the payments on your car. I named this Sojourner. No, here there is no performative. I advise you, performative. He advises you to keep up the payments. This is a normal sentence. This is a normal informative sentence. It's not a performative. Isn't giving the speech act of advice. When you use it, I advise you, then it's a performative verb because it's helping you to perform an action. But when you say he advises you, then you are not basically using this as a performative verb. You are just informing somebody about somebody's particular action, like somebody's action of giving advice. I named this ship Sojourner. Named. I name is pronounced. Is like you are performing that action. But when you say I named this ship, you are just informing. You are not performing the speech act of naming. In both these cases, the utterances simply reports. See, you are just informing. You are reporting. These verbs are being used for reporting and does not accomplish the act of advising or of naming. So, not doing any speech act, not performing any speech act of advising or naming, but just reporting, just informing the person about a certain action. We have a test to see whether some particular sentence is a performing utterance or a performative utterance or no. Let's perform this test. A test is whether or not a particular sentence is a performative utterance, or whether or not you can insert hereby before the verb. If you insert hereby before the verb, it can be a performative sentence. Now, hereby, again, in a different way. If the resulting sentence doesn't make any sense, it's not a performative. I hereby name this ship Sojourner, but I hereby named this ship Sojourner. Now you are using two different words here, two different words which can't be linked together, like hereby and named. Doesn't make any sense. Hereby means now. I now name this ship Sojourner, a performative action of naming. But when you say I hereby named you in the past, you named it in the past, and now you're saying I hereby. You're putting the present and the past together. Hereby means now, and named in the past. This sentence doesn't make any sense. So the M4 sentence, there is no performative verb. Named is not a performative verb. In order to test whether a verb is performative in a sentence or not, you can add the word hereby. A test of whether or not a particular sentence is a performative utterance is whether or not you can insert hereby before the verb. Just before the verb, put the word hereby. Just before the verb, see, put the word hereby, and you will come to know whether this verb is a performative verb or not. Likewise, here, if you say, I hereby, now this is a present verb, and this is again a present verb. You are doing an action in the present. I hereby name. So this makes sense, but what is the meaning of this? This is not a very clear sentence. I hereby named. Now this belongs to the past tense and this belongs to the present tense. So the sentence is meaningful, is not meaningful. So you see that the named here is not a performative verb, but the verb here, name, is a performative verb, helping you to perform the speech act of naming. Now, the question arises, how many different kinds of speech acts are there? We have so far seen so many speech acts of threatening, advising, requesting, ordering, so many speech verbs. Some researchers have extended the classical list of speech acts to include many actions helpful in analyzing task-oriented dialogues like answer, accept, reject, so far. So we see some more speech acts here. The researchers, in addition to the conventional ways to perform the speech acts, in addition to the conventional speech acts, they have also included some other speech acts like answer, accept, reject, and so forth. Now, conversational implication. The word of H.P. Grice takes pragmatics further than the study of speech acts. Grice's aim was to understand how speakers' meaning, what someone uses as an utterance to mean, arises from sentence meaning, the literal form or the meaning of an utterance. So what is the meaning of this paragraph, this small piece of language? The word H.P. Grice, the work of H.P. Grice takes a pragmatics farther than study of speech acts. Grice said that it's not, the language is not, pragmatics doesn't only mean the speech acts. He wanted to understand how the speaker's meaning, what someone uses an utterance to mean, arises from the sentence meaning. How can you judge a speaker's meaning from the sentence meaning? How can you go beyond that? What is what could be the speaker's meaning behind certain utterance? So he wanted to know why, what is the reason somebody has uttered a sentence. So he wanted to know what behind a sentence is, or what could the speaker mean. Now let's see what Grice meant and what Grice wanted to say. Grice proposed that many aspects of speaker's meaning result from the assumptions that the participants in a conversation are cooperating in an attempt to reach mutual goals, or at least are pretending to do so. So he proposed that speaker's meaning can result from different instances where the two speakers are trying to cooperate with each other to come to an agreement. Like they are conversing and they are trying to cooperate, and they are trying to reach to mutual goals or mutual agreement or mutual or a result which the speakers agree to, or at least they are trying to finish the thing, they are trying to sort out a matter, they are trying to reach to the end of the conversation, and they are trying to cooperate with each other. Now from here we can take out the meaning, we can try to understand what was in the mind of the speakers. He called this the cooperative principle. It has 4 subparts or maxims that cooperative conversations ought to in principle to respect. So when the two people are talking, they are trying to reach an agreement, they are cooperating with each other or pretending to cooperate with each other to reach to the end of the discussion, to reach to the end of the speech, or to reach to the end of the matter being discussed. They ought to respect 4 principles, and from that we can extract the meanings of the speakers, what hidden underlying meanings were there behind certain utterance by these speakers. Now, the maxim of quality. Speakers' contribution ought to be true. The maxim of quality means the word is self-explanatory. Quality, it has to have a quality, it has to be true to the fact, it has to be a fact. If it is false, if it's not truth, then of course they are not cooperating, they are trying to extend their discussion, they are not cooperating to finish the discussion, they are not cooperating to come to the mutual agreement. The maxim of quantity. Speaker's contribution should be as informative as required, not saying either too little or too much. So they should speak appropriately. They shouldn't speak more, they shouldn't speak less. So they are basically expected to speak to the point, to speak there. It sounds very cooperative, it sounds very nice, it sounds very suitable to the other person, and they are basically they are trying to it should sound as if they are trying to finish the discussion. They are not trying to argue, they are trying to bring the conversation to the end which is agreed upon by both the speakers. So if they are speaking much, then maybe the discussion might not come to that agreed upon end, but it would change into arguments, or it would change into fight. So the speaker's contribution should be as informative as required, to the point. An informative statement to the point. It should convey information that is required, not saying either too little or too much. This is a very common experience with us. A person who talks too little is difficult to understand, and a person who talks too much is again difficult to understand. So talking too little, too much, again these two personalities are difficult to understand. So when you discuss with them, when you have any discussion with these two kinds of personalities, you are likely to feel uncomfortable. There would be a point where you feel that you are not able to get along with that person nicely, and you may feel uncomfortable with such two personalities. So that is no cooperation basically. A cooperative speaker, a cooperative person to discuss with, it would be the one who would give enough information to arrive at an end of discussion where both the speakers are comfortable and they agree upon the solution. The maximum of relevance. It has to be relevant. Contributions should relate to the purposes of the exchange. Now, whenever you are talking, you have a purpose. Whenever you're talking with somebody, whenever you're discussing with somebody, you have to be, you have certain purpose in your mind. You have an aim to fulfill. You want to end the discussion at a point where the discussion would finish that you are comfortable. So it has to be relevant. If you cross the limits of relevance, you're basically not trying to come to the point. You're not trying to come to the mutual agreement. You're not trying to come to the mutual result. But you are trying to basically extend, and you would be beating about the bush. You would just not be relevant. You would not be precise. So precision is what is required if you want to have a fruitful discussion and a mutually agreed upon end. So contributions should relate to the purpose of exchange. The maxim of manner. Contributions should be perspicuous. In particular, they should be orderly and brief, avoiding obscurity and ambiguity. All these words are very easy to understand. Avoiding obscurity and ambiguity. No ambiguity should be there. The maxim of manner. Manner means character. The contributions should be particular. They should be orderly, arranged, and brief. And they should not be confusing. They should not be ambiguous. There should be no confusion in the contributions or confusion in the discussion or whatever the speakers utter. If there is confusion, then again the result would be different. The result would not be agreed upon by both. So that would not be again a fruitful discussion. So 4 maxims. They believe in 4 maxims. 2 speakers who want to come to a mutual agreement, who want to finish it nicely, they would have to believe in these 4 maxims: the maxim of quality, maxim of quantity, maxim of relevance, maxim of manner. Quality, that anything you say has to be true, not a lie. It has to be truth. Whatever you say has to be enough for the other person to understand. Not too little, not too much. Third one, the maxim of relevance. It should be relevant, it should be to the point, related to the point, not out of context, in context. Number 4, maxim of manner. That it should be arranged, brief, and no confusion should be there. Clear. The element of clarity should be there. So 4 maxim that Grice gave us in order to get to the meaning of the speaker, the hidden underlying meaning of the speaker when we see the utterance of a speaker, and we can get to the meaning of meaning of the speaker from the meaning of the sentence. Now, summing up today's discussion, we say pragmatics, the study of how to do things with words. People use language to accomplish certain kinds of acts, broadly known as speech acts. Then we talked about speech acts. They are distinct, like drinking of glass of water, or mental acts like thinking about drinking a glass of water. You could even mime, you could even perform an action, give a gesture of drinking water, and you can even speak certain sentences, certain words to ask for a glass of water. Then we talked about the direct speech acts and the indirect speech acts. The direct speech acts, there were 3 different types we discussed in the chart. You remember, we said about the assertion, we said about the question, we said about the request. So different ways to perform these speech acts, the direct speech acts. Then we talked about the indirect speech acts, that same things can be said indirectly. Like we had example of, did Jenny get A grade? Do you know Jenny got A grade? And again, I wonder if you know Jenny got in A grade. So you have different ways to perform one speech act. Then we also said that different languages, they have different words, but some languages, they do not have different structures for different functions. Like we saw the example of if. Now if can be used to give threat. If can also be used to request. If can also be used to show the cause-effect relationship. If you cross this line, I'll shoot you. If you help me, I'll be thankful. If you work hard, you will pass. So showing cause-effect relationship, you have one word doing 3 different speech acts. So not all the languages have different structures. Some of the languages they don't have, and it is by using certain words that you can convert the same sentences to different. You can make same sentences do different speech acts. Performatives, we saw the performing words. I assert, I order, I promise. You are using the direct performatives, verbs, to do speech, to perform speech acts. You are using these words directly in the sentence. I order you to close the window. I tell you to close the window. I promise you. I assert, I promise that I promise to get you a car if you get A grade. So you are using them directly to perform the speech acts. But here again, you have a test that if you can put a word like it's not necessary that you you always call them assertive. Sometimes they are just informing, they are just used to report an event. I hereby, you have the word I hereby pronounce, I hereby name you this, I hereby name this plane as jet. So here you're just reporting, you're not using it for performing speech act. Now if you put hereby just before the verb and it becomes confusing. For example, I hereby named this ship. So you're putting hereby in the present belongs to present tense and named belongs to past tense. So the sentence becomes confusing. So you can't say that here named is being used as a performative. But if you just say I hereby name you this, I hereby name this ship. So now you are using the word named as a performative verb, because you are performing that action, the speech act of naming directly there. The sentence can be understood. I hereby inform you. But if you say I hereby informed you, that would be wrong. I hereby tell you, I hereby request you, I hereby order you, that all is correct. But if you put a past tense with that, I hereby ordered you, I hereby told you, I hereby informed you, that would be wrong, because you are linking present with the past. So again, we talked finally about some assertions, asking, order, promises, threats, warnings. All these speech acts, you have different ways, different sentences to perform speech acts. To assert, you have different words. To ask, you have different words. To order, you have different words. To promise, I promise you, or I will get you, using a modal verb of promise. No, will. You're using a modal verb will to do this, perform the speech act of promise. You can use words for threats. I tell you I'm going to kill you. I tell you I will kill you if you do that. You do that, I'll kill you. So there are different ways to give threats. Again, if you cross this line, I'll shoot you. So you're giving threats using different structures. Warnings can also be warning. If you miss another class, you'll be out of the class, you'll be out of the university. So here you are giving warnings. You miss another class, you're out of the university. Or indirectly, you can just say you are already under warning. Or I wonder how many classes you have missed. I wonder if you're planning to stay in this university. So these are different sentences that could be used for warnings. So here it was a very fruitful discussion about the different ways you can link up words. There are more speech acts to analyze task-oriented dialogues like answer, accept, reject, and so forth. We have so many other speech acts being entered by being put into the list of speech acts, the traditional list of speech acts by the language analyzers. They are analyzing the language, they are studying the language, and they are putting more words. They are adding to the vocabulary of, they're adding to the list, adding to the storehouse of speech acts. Cooperative speakers respect four maxims. Again, Rice, finally we said that the two speakers who are trying to reach to a mutual agreement, they are basically supposed to, expected to behave or expected to behave towards each other, and expected to be cooperative towards each other, and they are expected to believe four maxims if they are to reach a mutual agreement. The maxim of quality, maxim of quantity, maxim of relevance, maxim of manner, that they have to be true, they have to speak to the point, they have to be relevant, and they have to be exact, precise, brief, ordered, and they have to utter ordered arranged speech. That is how we can expect that they are cooperating with each other and they are performing the speech act of coming to the of agreeing with each other and arriving at a mutual agreement where both will feel comfortable. So in this society, people interact with each other. People have different purposes. People have different purposes for interacting with each other. People have different desires which they need to meet, and for that they interact with each other, they communicate with each other, and they have different words. They have a storehouse of words at their disposal to use them the way they like, to just change them, to change the order, to basically be polite sometimes, be rude sometimes. So sometimes they need to avoid the rudeness. Sometimes they need to, they don't want to accuse somebody bluntly. So that is where they go for the depersonalized way sometimes, like instead of saying you forgot to send me the check, like a banker, instead of a banker telling somebody that you forgot to send a check, can even say the envelope we received didn't have a check. So another way to maybe remind the customer that they forgot to send the check. So in order to avoid that blunt accusation, the banker is using another sentence. So a very nice discussion today, that we saw how people can play with words, people can do things with words, people can get their motives fulfilled, people can get their desires fulfilled by using words in different orders. This is all we had for today. Until the next lecture, we'll be talking some new theories, and we'll also be talking about some new concepts of linguistics. It's goodbye from here. Thank you.